Have you ever wondered what it means to live a halal lifestyle? It's a question that resonates within the hearts and minds of many. But let's clear one thing up. Halal is not just about the food we consume. It's a holistic approach that extends to all facets of life, from the clothes we wear to the way we conduct business. It's about living a life that is ethical, sustainable, and in harmony with the teachings of Islam. Leading a halal lifestyle is a fundamental pillar for Muslims, a guiding principle that helps maintain a balanced way of life. It's about making conscious choices that align with Islamic principles, promoting physical, mental, and spiritual health. It's about fostering a deep sense of morality, respect for others, and environmental stewardship. Now, we'll delve deeper into the principles of halal living. Join us as we unlock the secrets of a balanced Muslim lifestyle, one halal hack at a time. The principles of halal living extend far beyond what we consume. To truly grasp the essence of halal living, we must first understand its fundamental principles. These principles are not merely guidelines for dietary habits, but they extend to every aspect of a Muslim's life. Let's delve into these principles and see how they shape a well-rounded Muslim lifestyle. At the core of halal living is the principle of purity, or tahara. Purity is not just about physical cleanliness, but it also involves purifying one's thoughts, intentions, and actions. This concept of purity permeates a Muslim's daily routines, from the way they prepare food to the way they engage in prayer and other acts of worship. Next, we have the principle of kindness. Islam teaches that kindness should be extended to all of God's creation, whether human, animal, or the environment. This principle encourages Muslims to act compassionately and responsibly, fostering a sense of community and mutual respect. Honesty is another cornerstone of halal living. Islam places a high value on truthfulness, urging its followers to be honest in their words, actions, and dealings. This principle is not only integral to personal interactions, but also shapes the way Muslims conduct business and financial transactions. Lastly, we have the principle of integrity. Integrity in Islam means to be consistent in upholding moral and ethical standards, regardless of the situation or circumstance. This principle guides Muslims to live a life of consistency, where their beliefs, words, and actions are in harmony. These principles, purity, kindness, honesty, and integrity, are deeply interwoven into the fabric of a Muslim's life. They guide everything, from the simplest daily routines to complex decisions and interactions. They shape a Muslim's worldview, encouraging them to live a life that is not only halal in the dietary sense, but also halal in the broader sense of being wholesome, balanced, and ethical. As we've seen, halal living is about much more than food. It's a comprehensive lifestyle that promotes balance and ethical conduct. One of the most well-known aspects of halal living is the dietary restrictions. Now, what does this really mean? Well, in essence, it's about eating foods that are clean, wholesome, and prepared in a manner that respects life and nature. A halal diet consists of foods that are permissible or halal according to Islamic law, as defined in the Quran. This includes fruits, vegetables, grains, and halal meats. Halal meats are those from animals that have been slaughtered in a specific way, ensuring they were healthy at the time of death and that the process caused minimal pain. This method of slaughter also ensures that most of the blood, which can carry toxins, is drained from the animal's body. Certain foods, however, are not permissible or haram. These include pork and its byproducts, carnivorous animals, birds of prey, and any animal not slaughtered according to Islamic law. Alcohol is also considered haram. But here's the thing, a halal diet isn't just about what you can and can't eat. It's also about the ethos behind the food. It's about consuming food that's good for your body, but also good for your soul. It's about understanding where your food comes from and how it's produced. For instance, the halal diet encourages the consumption of ethically sourced and produced foods. This means animals must be treated well, given clean food and water, and not be subjected to cruel conditions. This ethical element of halal is often overlooked, but it's a crucial part of the diet. In addition to the ethical considerations, a halal diet can also offer numerous health benefits. The prohibition of certain foods and drinks like pork and alcohol can lead to a healthier lifestyle. Plus, the emphasis on eating clean and wholesome foods promotes better nutrition. And let's not forget, halal isn't just about the physical, it's about the spiritual too. When we eat halal, we're mindful of our blessings, we give thanks, and we remember the connection between our food and our faith. So the next time you sit down for a meal, remember this. A halal diet is not merely about restrictions, but about mindful eating and ethical consumption. It's about nourishing not just your body, but your soul too. Did you know that the principles of halal also apply to business and finance? That's right, folks. When we speak of halal, it's not just about the food we eat. It extends to the way we earn and spend our money too. Islamic finance, a cornerstone of Muslim lifestyle, is a system that operates in accordance with the rules of Sharia, or Islamic law. One of the key principles that sets it apart is the prohibition of interest, or riba. This is because in Islam, money is not seen as an asset to be traded, it's simply a medium of exchange. So, making money from money, like charging interest, is not permissible. Instead, Islamic finance promotes risk sharing, where both parties share in the profit or loss of a business venture. Now, let's talk about ethical business practices. Islam places a high emphasis on honesty, integrity, and fair dealing. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was himself a trader and set a shining example of ethical conduct in business. There's a saying of his that goes, "A truthful and trustworthy merchant will be in the company of the prophets, the truthful, and the martyrs." This tells us just how much importance is placed on ethics in trade. Moreover, fair trade is another crucial aspect of halal in business. Islam encourages trade, but it insists on justice and forbids acts that may lead to injustice, inequality, or deception. For instance, selling goods without proper disclosure of defects or exploiting someone's ignorance for personal gain is strictly prohibited. In essence, the halal principles in business and finance are all about promoting a system that is just, equitable, and transparent. It's about establishing a balance between the material and the spiritual, between the individual and the society, between the producer and the consumer, and between the rights and obligations. So the next time you think about halal, remember, it's not just what's on your plate, but also what's in your wallet. In the world of business and finance, halal means fair play and justice for all. Halal principles also guide social interactions and behavior among Muslims. In the vast tapestry of life, threads of social interactions and behavior are woven together, creating the fabric of our daily existence. Halal principles are the guiding threads that help create a harmonious and balanced pattern in the life of a Muslim. One of the cornerstones of halal social interactions is kindness. Kindness in Islam is not just an abstract virtue, it's a way of life. It's about offering a helping hand to a neighbor, sharing a smile with a stranger, and nurturing relationships with love and understanding. It's the little acts of kindness that add up to make a big difference. Honesty, too, is a vital part of halal behavior. It's not just about refraining from lying. It's about being truthful in our actions, our words, and our thoughts. Honesty in Islam is about integrity and authenticity. It's about being true to oneself and to others. It's about keeping promises and fulfilling commitments, no matter how big or small. Respect is another essential element of halal social interactions. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every individual, regardless of their race, religion, or status. It's about honoring others' rights, feelings, and beliefs. In essence, respect in Islam is about treating others the way we would like to be treated. Community plays a central role in halal social behavior. Muslims are encouraged to foster a sense of community, to support each other in times of need, and to contribute positively to society. The importance of helping those in need is emphasized repeatedly in the Quran and Hadith. In conclusion, halal social interactions and behavior are about more than just following a set of rules. They're about cultivating a spirit of kindness, honesty, respect, and communal responsibility. They're about creating an environment where everyone is valued and respected. Living a halal lifestyle means treating every individual with respect and kindness. So what have we learned about the halal lifestyle? In the past 10 minutes, we've unpacked the essence of halal living, a lifestyle that's holistic, ethically sound, and respectful. We've explored the principles that guide halal living, from integrity and responsibility to empathy and respect, forming the foundation of a balanced life. We delved into halal food and diet, understanding that it's not just about what we consume, but how it's sourced and prepared. We've discussed the importance of ethical considerations in business and finance, where halal principles promote fairness and discourage exploitation. We've also touched on the significance of halal in social interactions and behavior, underlining the need for respect, kindness, and understanding in our dealings with others. As we wrap up, consider how these principles can be incorporated into your life. It's not about drastic changes, but gradual conscious decisions that align with the values of halal living. Remember, living a halal lifestyle is about striving for balance, ethical conduct, and respect for all. It's a journey worth taking.